Hey, Composer Gloves here, and today we are going to be talking about an introduction to melodic bass, because I didn't really do this for the neuro track, and so I felt like I just sort of made a track, and that's kind of what I'm going to do with melodic bass. But I really quick want to show you. So okay, here's what I got melodic bass wise. If this isn't something you're interested in, then you may not be interested in the rest of this series. So here is the melodic bass. As this is not a done track, it's just something I whipped together to sort of demonstrate some of the stuff that I will be showing you. And we're going to be talking about conventions of melodic bass in this video. So 3, 2, 1. So yeah, there's still a number of like mixing things. I was mixing it over monitors, sounds quite different over headphones. So I would need to do a couple reference mixes and stuff. And I've done some pretty general mixing. There's a lot of side chaining. So okay, so let's start talking about melodic bass. Melodic bass is sort of like drum and bass, only like dubstep drum and bass. So it's just like fast dubstep kind of. But it's not. So what do you mean? Like there's no rips. Like there's none of the big wah 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 stuff. But a lot of the conventions of dubstep make it into melodic drum and bass. For example, there was a couple tracks I've heard that have snares that are not like this. But most of the tracks that I listened to had that. Like I believe I only heard one that had a typical like acoustic sort of snare hit from some sort of a break. It's very, very dubstep drum orientated. So yeah, this is my drum, and they definitely rock that rhythm. Like almost all of them without exception had this exact rhythm as far as this. I know it's a very, very common dubstep rhythm, but like they didn't deviate from it very much at all. So it's just a common thing, but here it's extra prevalent. And the drums are very, boom, dun, that kind of a thing. They sound like that. They have like snares that are like doofish. I don't know. D starts with a D, something doofy. Some sort of like a snare that's like doo. They have that. That's a big thing in there. So, and they mix it so that it will sidechain everything. So it's very, very similar to dubstep in that fashion. There's always a lot going on. The melodic content. So let's talk about this. The sound design is actually really simple. The sound design is usually pretty simple. I have a lot of elements going on, and I don't have any structure to my track yet. But one thing that you will see is there are filters everywhere. I didn't put in even enough filters to compare it to the amount of filtering I heard everywhere. Like they just use it to meld all the parts together, so that make it sound really melodic. So here you'll notice at the intro, this like small intro thing, everything's being filtered. Literally, there's nothing in here that's not being filtered. So filter for the pad and the ARP, which I have an ARP going on. And also filter on this is a manual ARP that I just wrote out. And it's got a cool delay thing going on. So I'm using Massive and a combination of Massive and Harmor. There is a small riser, blah, blah, blah. That's like transitional stuff, not too big of a deal. But there's like structurally going on. They usually get to the drop. I don't know. I feel like some of them take their time getting there, and then some are like 4 measures, boom, we're like jamming, and it doesn't take any time at all to get to the drop. Usually it's like an introductory drop that leads to like the full jam session. It's not like a drop in that when it drops, you've dropped. It's like you've dropped, you're now jamming. It's all about the jam with melodic drum and bass. So here, another thing that is just everywhere is, the melody. So I wrote out a pretty basic melody here. Oh, it's all that filtering going on. So let me solo my lead. Whoops. So this is, I've seen all variations. I've seen simple bell textures that they just sort of lightly touch it up. I've seen there's two kinds of melodic variation that I saw were very prevalent. Well, there were 3. One was vocals. They had a small backing track, very usually pretty simple chords and stuff, and then they had some just dope singer, which is what you could do because singing, you know, that's a very attractive thing in a song. It's a song. So the other thing was big chords. So I tried to incorporate sort of both of them in this one. So they have things like this going on. And so they do stuff like that. And that's like, you know, it's whatever. So that was one major style I saw, though, was they would feature a chord progression rather than a melody. And it sounded pretty melodic, and they'd have things going around it, and they'd have like small melodies. But if you do this, you usually can't have a big melody line. I tried to do it, so they sort of clash a little bit, but I think it's okay. So this is my melody. I just wrote out a melody, very stepwise progression, you know, just melodizing things. Man, I love stuff like that. So that's something that in native FL, the piano roll just gives you incredible power. So I like to write leads with like Harmor or Citrus because they are incredibly easy to write lines for and automate and things inside FL. Third-party VSTs, you can do it. Of course, it's not difficult to do. Well, it is. It's a bit more difficult because here you can draw slide time and glide time, whatever you want to call it, and do all that stuff. There you'd have to automate the pitch and you'd have to copy and paste. It's like, and you can't exactly see what notes you're reaching. So it's just more complicated. I wonder if there's like a plugin out there to sort of facilitate that. Ooh, that'd be a cool idea. If ImageLine is listening, some sort of plugin that facilitates that go-between. Or maybe you just, I'm not sure, there's got to be some sort of a standard that sort of gets in the way when you're programming it. Because I'm not a big programmer, but I do know a little. Actually, I know next to nothing compared to most people. But it's like, it's interesting. That'd be a cool thing if they could incorporate slide notes. I don't know. Maybe, is there a way? Like, if there is, you should drop it in the comments. Then I have this layer lead going on. It doesn't, since it's massive, it doesn't give me the slide abilities. That's what it sounds like. And combined, it occasionally plays harmonies rather than the line. Like you see here, it plays a C, where the main line's like playing an A or something. It's like a minor third harmonization. See, it doesn't use the slides at all. It'd be so cool if it used the slides too, but it doesn't. The ARPs, nothing shocking there. There's reverb on everything, like just tons and tons of reverb. The sub is, that's my sub. If I take it down a couple octaves. So, and it's playing it follows the chord progression. Everything, the chord progressions are very important. Like, if you can come up with a cool chord progression, you'll come up with a cool melodic bass thing. That's going to be a big thing, is sort of walking into this, what kind of chords do you want to use? And then once you have them, it doesn't necessarily, this is why I think the pads are popular. Once you have your chord progression, people tend to just, block it out. Like, oh, when I say block it out, I mean they'll write the progression. Like, they'll write it out, and sometimes they're just big pads. And I'm like, oh yeah. Then I think we could use that and make something really cool that I kind of want to use, some sequenced chord things. But so I want to experiment with that. But I want to try and steer clear of anything that's like too obvious, like the big where they just drag it out for the whole bar. That could be a thing though. Like, that's a very common thing too. But I like the people who sort of syncopate a bunch of rhythms to form the chord structure through various variation of synthesizers and all that kind of a thing, that kind of structure. I like that more. And so we're going to try and do that. Actually, I don't like it more. It seems a little more fun to do. Maybe I'll end up doing the other one. I don't know. If it jams better, it just jams better. Okay, I have an ARP here. And here is... So I already showed you the ARP. And then let's see, sub, massive. This is what is this? I've forgotten what it was. Oh, this is a second reinforcement. So let me thin down what I'm doing here, because there's a lot going on. Ideally in my drop, I'm not going to have this much going on. So I'll probably just leave everything off except for the main lead, the ARP, and I'll leave the sub on too. And there's a lot of EQing and stuff, and the low end's sort of a disaster zone right now, I know, but here we go. So you can hear it very clearly now what it's doing. So with like in the pattern. it just adds that extra little woo. And I just went preset digging. That's all I did. I have like tons of them, and I could make something cool, but this is kind of an element that it's sort of helpful just to sort of stumble across something that's kind of cool and work at it from there. So from there, I just changed the filter cutoff and the reverb size. I mean, like, it just general mixing stuff, very simple. I always think it's funny when, because I like to watch tutorials too. I think it's valuable to see what other people say, even if they know like less than you in general. I think it's valuable. They might have some secret that you don't know about, and so I like to, if they seem like they're saying something cool, I'll watch them. Even because at first it was like I'd only watch FL stuff. Now it's like I don't care what DAW you're using, I'll watch it. So one of the things that I came across, though, is kind of a common thing, is people will open this up and they'll dig through some presets, but they don't know anything about the synthesis. And so if the preset doesn't sound exactly the way they want it, they're like, oh, this is close, but this isn't it. And they keep looking through other presets. I'm like, what are you doing? You could fix it with just 2 knob turns. So I always think that's kind of funny when people do that. It's nothing against them. It's just funny to me because I was there once where if it didn't sound exactly the way I wanted, I had no clue what buttons to push or to turn. And so I just I was the victim. I was a victim, and I stayed the victim until I finally learned synthesis. Okay, so one other thing. I have this. This was an element. So I listened to this like a bunch of times, and I'm like, man, there is something else I need there. And I determined it was a spectral problem, that I was missing the upper end of my spectrum in a way, like it wasn't being the rhythm. It was a rhythmic spectral thing. So I came up with this as sort of my solution. And it literally, I was like, I like the sort of the square saw thing. It sounds sort of like a pluck. It's just default. Like literally, when you open up Massive, this is the first sound that pops up. And I really like this sound. I'm a sucker for these kinds of sounds because they're very melodic in nature. They're very easy to write melodies with. So I was like, man, I'll just make some sort of a cool delay arp. So I came in here, turned it on, reverb, delay. And I believe I turned the feedback up a little bit, made it, is that all the way wet? Very wet. And I left everything else alone. I thought about making this crazier, but I like the syncopated rhythm it gave. And then ideally, when you're making this, you're going to so what are the conventions? So we have the drums, that's one convention. 2, we have the types of melody, the voice, the chords, or like the written melody. And MIDI music theory, if you're curious about that, I'm going to be doing some more videos in that series on specifically melody embellishments that you have available to you at some point. Like that's the next thing I sort of want to approach there, because there's like 6 or 7 different tools for writing melody that I use here. That you may not be aware of. Let me just give you a couple examples. So this one right here is called a neighboring tone. So when you go up, you have one tone, it goes up to another tone, and it goes back down to your original tone. It's called the neighboring tone, and it is really cool because it embellishes this tone. So it's very nifty. And then a lot of these are just good stepwise progressions. Like here, I could go from E to A, which are both tones of my chord, but I throw in a G to make that transition smoother. It's called the stepwise progression. And what's really cool is when over here I'm moving in A minor. So if all this stuff's beyond you, I have a whole 70-part series that will take you through everything. I'm not gonna try and squeeze it all into one video. It's impossible. You gotta go from the ground up. So I mean, some people try and cheat the system by using numbers and stuff, but they basically just reinvented interval counting. I think it's so silly that they did that. It's basically rundown music theory. You're not going to be able to write, it robs you of a lot of tools. You won't be able to reach a high level of proficiency as for if you want to get into more advanced musics. So anyways, we have C, and then over here we have the natural half step in the A minor scale. I'm moving in A minor, by the way. So this is when you use a stepwise progression like this, it's like a double whammy. It's so good. And if I wanted to use some chord embellishments, it'd be kind of cool to throw in some 7 chords maybe right there. Now on this kind of melodic bass, it's very pop sort of oriented chord progression wise. It's got the 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression, stuff like that. Some basic authentic cadences and plagal cadences and stuff like that. They don't go into 7s too much, but I feel like you could easily go jazzy. The cool thing about melodic bass is it just has to really jam melodically. It's a tonally focused melodic bass. It's not a rhythmically focused one. That's why the rhythm, we focus more on the tonal composition, not the sound design. We don't focus we do focus on the sound design. That's really important too, but it's definitely taking a back seat compared to dark step or neurofunk. And we also rhythm takes a back seat. We do like both these things are still mega important because it's still drum and bass, so it's kind of ironic, but they're definitely like back there, especially when you consider things like breakcore, where it's like all about the insane rhythm drum thing. So here it's like it's a little different. So again, I think my drop could be stronger if I just thin things out and introduce them over time. So I could arrive, so I could have some sort of an intro, arrive at my drop, and then go. This is not the track I'm gonna make. This because I didn't really record me making it. I have found that I am much stronger at producing when I'm not recording myself, because I'm free to go and listen and practice. I have a whole video about how to listen, like listening for inspiration. Look it up. And it, yeah, that's pretty fundamental to what I do. So sometimes if I get stuck, I like to go and listen to like a mix. And it's also a really good idea before you sit down to write a track to be like, what kind of track do I want to write? Sort of think of a name and then listen to it for like an hour. If you have the luxury of doing a lot of listening before you start your track, it's a huge help, because then you have this whole palette of ideas that can come to you. And I encourage you to sort of write down what's going on. Like I was taking like some mental notes about the drums. I almost wrote them down, but I was like, nah, I'll just make one right now. So the drums, chords, melody. So if you listen, they're not that complicated. I'm probably going to steer clear of singers, because I don't want to do a whole collaboration thing that just take too long, and it would be all the logistics of getting the singer over here, because I know some pretty awesome girls who sing really well, who I've done stuff with before. I bet they'd be so down to do this, but I don't feel like you guys necessarily have those types of connection, and you may not have like either the skills or knowledge. Not necessarily skills or knowledge. You might just not own the stuff to do it a good job on it or whatever. Honestly, all you need is an audio interface and a Shure SM57. If you got those two things and an SLR cord, you know, the computer, all that stuff you probably already have. If you have those things, you're pretty much set to find someone to sing. People make a big deal about condenser mics, but honestly, 57, if you're going to buy one microphone, that's all you get. You want to go probably with a 57 because it just does everything. Like literally everything. You don't want to get a USB mic. Some people do that because they don't own an audio interface yet, and I'm just telling you, it's a bad idea. Go with the 57. There are a couple USB mics out there that are worth it now, that like do a good job, but it's a USB mic. I don't know. This is still a sketchy area for me. I have a little bit of experience with them, but the things that are standardized, like YouTube uses like Blue Yeti or whatever, those things are like not good ideas to get for like professional recordings. Like if you want to put it in a track, you're generally going to want something that's, you know, pretty standardized. If you walk into a studio without a 57, I'd be kind of curious as to what other mics they have, because the 57 is like the standard. Like it's used everywhere, and it's what is it, twin cousin or whatever? Twin cousin, is that even a thing? Twin brother, the Shure Beta 58. That's like everywhere too, and there's like variations on it that are small variations, but those two things are like everywhere. So you've seen a Beta 58. I'm not sure if you've seen a 57, but if you're in audio, you probably have. Like this is a 57. Now you've seen one. So yeah, that's some of the conventions behind it. So when I look at this is what I'm going to be doing structurally wise. That they get to the jam. And they have a couple moments that are kind of cool. We're gonna replace voice with melodic content, which is what I looked at doing here. In case you're really curious about the sound design, because I do have courses. I have a sound design width on everything except I don't have it on massive, but I only use Harmor and Massive in this particular project. And in it, it's a very distorted saw wave, a square wave that's sort of half saw, and this is a saw wave. And oh, I didn't turn on part B. On the chords, which I labeled pads, B and A play different roles, and B is an octave higher. A has got this is what I got going. Like I'm not going to explain it, but this is what I got going, so you could pause it or whatever. I'll hang it on the screen a little bit. That way you could get a good chance to pause it. And then here's part B. And then the EQs are important. Very important. I don't believe I touched anything else, just the EQs. And I love the EQs here because of the nature of them. Look up that, like the miraculous coolness of additive EQ in my Hummer from the Ground Up series. And then I have like a limiter on the limiters are all just side chaining crap. So I have that on almost everything. The kick is I'm reasonably happy with this kick. It's a big kick. It sounds a little like unusual. This is a kick that you've got to mix with inside your mix. If you mix the kick by itself, it's not going to sound you have to listen to it in context. Like sometimes you can make a really good kick, but here I would like make different decisions based off of just that. But in the mix, it like fit. So you got to make decisions like that. And here's this. Now I didn't do my mix down. Like this could benefit so much from like a real mix down. I'd probably be able to fit a lot more. And even if it's like a lot of stuff's going on, I could probably fit a bit more. Probably be a bad idea still. So I don't know. I'm kind of hesitant on what I want to do. Maybe I'll end up writing something crazy, but this is a genre where you typically don't get too insane with things. If you have any questions, let me know. What's your take on melodic bass? Maybe your favorite track in melodic bass. I'm always down to listen to more so I can improve my abilities and also just find dope artists. And if you make melodic bass, you might want to drop yours down below. I don't know. You know, what's your take on all this? What do you think of this? Did you like my mix? Did you not like my mix? What things would you do different? What else are conventions that you know about that you're like, oh, you didn't cover this thing? That's a pretty common thing they do. And so it's like, oh, I didn't know that. You know, that kind of a thing. It'd be cool. If you have any questions, again, let me know. Subscribe and have a blessed day.